All right, here we go again with another episode of Coach's Corner. I'm delighted to be joined today by Patrice Parris, a good friend of mine, a coach I very much respect and compete against year in, year out. It's always a fierce rivalry and a good battle, but always one with respect. And maybe we'll get to some of that rivalry in a little bit. But the head coach at University of North Georgia in the Peach Belt Conference, and we can get to some leadership and management and coaching hopefully in a little while. But you and I spoke earlier in the week, and whatever platform we have here, hopefully we can use it to impact some people. So first things first, what it's been a strange year first and foremost with everything that's been going on, and even more so recently with current events. So how do you begin to, now you've had a couple of days since we spoke, how do you begin to sort of summarize and reflect on your thoughts and feelings in the last few weeks?
Yeah, first off, thank you for the opportunity, Lee. It's I'm very gracious and humbled for the opportunity. And what we do every day is, we're here to teach and coach these young student athletes that come through our doors, right? So the other day, you call me to check on me, and we talk. We have a conversation, and I think it starts with what we're doing now and having conversations to see why is this still continuing to happen in regards of George Floyd, another victim. And how can we go about change? How can we, the question I keep getting is, from my friends or from coaches that don't look like me, what can I do to help? What can we do to help? And I really feel it starts with having the ability to have someone outside their comfort zone, outside their normal routine in life, to say, let's sit down as a department or as a group or as friends or colleagues and just help me to understand. Because on the other side of the spectrum, I'll have people that I know that say, I don't know what it is to be a person of color, but I think if there's a relationship with someone of color or groups of people of color or someone that does not look like you or think like you start to generate ideas or thoughts that can allow either a person to grow, to self-reflect on both sides. I think organizations can develop new master plans of where they want their organization to go to if we allow ourselves to be open to have those types of conversations. I'll give you an example that our tennis coach, we're pretty close, and a couple of years ago we did the same thing that the young man in Brunswick did, Hamad. There was a house that was under construction, and we were both at the same time looking for houses for our families, and he's like, hey, let's go inside. And I kind of was hesitant just because of the location where we were at the time. And he's like, man, it's okay. It's okay. We've done this a million times. My dad does this when he was younger, It's like, okay, fine. Fast forward to now, after our group discussion that we had the other day this week, he remembers that event. And he remembers how hesitant I was to go into a building that people that don't look like me will go in just to check out the specs. And he remembers the hesitation, he remembers the worry, and he's reflecting. He's like, man, I can't believe that I did not notice that before. So those little conversations, micro conversations, can allow for growth in the bigger picture, I believe, especially when, you and I, we work for universities, and universities' missions are to produce leaders, to produce these young minds that are going to go out to the world and help change their local communities or the communities or society where they're going to end up going to. And we have the privilege to have a different dynamic than most schools because we have internationals and then we have local kids. So it really shows a diverse way of thinking when you have teams like that.
Yeah, and I know, from like I said, from my perspective, I've clearly not had some of the experiences growing up or even recently that yourself have had. I'm trying to see outside of myself to like you said, trying to better understand it, and then trying to educate myself so that I can better impact those that I lead and that I'm responsible for. So my team, my kids, and really anyone that I come into contact with. It's incomprehensible to me that a person can view another person because of the way they look, the way they think, the way that their beliefs, or the economic background they come from, whatever, um, whichever way you want to look at the differences we all have. It's incomprehensible to me that without getting to know the person, that there are bad people that do wrong things, across all walks of life, and it's incomprehensible to me. Maybe perhaps in part to the way I've grown up, and not necessarily seeing it, or maybe being blind a little bit to it. But it's incomprehensible to me that people would not have that respect for another human being based on skin color or economic situation or sexual preferences or whatever the case might be. But I'm definitely wanting to better educate myself to help impact those around. And from all the research and things I've watched and listened to over the last sort of couple of weeks, it seems like that's maybe the best and the only place to start is to help educate and spread the message. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. It's all about, sometimes we go about our daily lives, which we should in an ideal world, and we stay in our lanes, and we go about our business, our jobs, and everything like that. And obviously, there's so many different platforms that we can't attack it at once. But let's go back to the basic foundations of what this country was founded on. You know, justice for all. You know, and if that's going to be in our pledge and the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and all these things that we this country and organizations have put together in their mission statements, then why is it so hard to follow those ideals? They cannot be separate to, good for one and good, not good for another. And obviously in our line of work, one must be open to different cultures, religions, and people from different backgrounds. You made a good point in regards of, maybe culturally where you were raised or whatnot in your family home, that was not a reflection of what's happening in society. I can relate that for me growing up, my father was in the military. My parents are Jamaican. I was born here in the States. Growing up in that military setting is 10 times different than growing up in the civilian world that we see now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was brought together from the people from within the military because of the common bond that we have of being deployed away from the country, or being able to see outside of the United States and take in the different cultures that we come in, and meeting different people, and really believing in the creed of what this country was meant to be. So you fast forward and we leave, Stuttgart, Germany, a country where they had to face a lot of discrimination of what was happening back in the World War. So you move from Germany to Hinesville, Georgia, and the first thing I could think of is like Dukes of Hazzards or something, country where they're not going to have me or soccer available. And we learned that the school that I was going to previously just had a race war or fight, which to me was, once again, coming from the military background, did not make sense as a sophomore coming into that school. So you could imagine the first day I'm walking around like, all right, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
What's the issue? And when I got there, it was just different factions of different students in that school, but nothing really ever transpired or anything like that. Uh, just like any high school, different cliques and everything like that. So you fast forward, end up going to Georgia Southern, um, and I tell the story to many people where, growing up in the military, the barbershop, had black, white, Hispanic, Asian be able to cut my hair and cut everyone else's hair and do a great job. And maybe this is a part of me being naive at the time, but we go preseason or whatnot, and I go to this barber shop and I go into it, um, and they, the owners are like, "Can we help you?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm just here for a haircut." And their 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 back was, "If we don't cut your type of hair here." No kind of, my gut dropped, never pointed me in the right direction of where to go. But that right there was the first time where I dealt with, I'm not gonna say necessarily racism, but someone that wasn't open enough to, understand that the dollar is a dollar and you can expand your business if you know how to be able to cut other people's hair and everything like that. But that was the first time where literally the barbershop that I had to attend to was across the tracks in a different part of town. But throughout my career as a college athlete or even a high school athlete, I've been called names on the field. I've been tried to be, people try to belittle me in regards to that. Um, there was a time when we played a club team from Atlanta down in Hinesville, and you know, I was called a certain name on the field. This is while during the run of play. And these are things, there's no cameras back then. It's my word versus his word. Those are things that subconsciously eat away at you when you're faced with those situations. Uh, and even getting into the college ranks of coaching, there have been times where you feel that injustice is being done in regards of of what you look like. Um, there's so many times, there's so many times, Lee, where outside of my circle, people will meet me and the first thing they ask, "Oh, you coach basketball?" You know, those are the little microaggressions that just assuming from what I look like, or, "Oh, you coach football?" Well, I say I coach the other type of football, that we use at our
Yeah,
feet.
yeah,
So those are the things that, I face, and those things are not going to end anytime soon. But once again, that just shows, a microcosm of what's happening in the country when we just happen just to look. And that can happen to anyone. I know this, but it's very typical with, someone like myself or my assistant where that happens. I could be on campus and someone that doesn't know me from the athletic department would be part of the basketball staff. I'm like, no,
yeah.
no. And then that becomes a teaching opportunity.
Sure. I mean, a 5'9" white guy from England is definitely not going to get asked the same thing. So, yeah, again, I don't know. I mean, I've been in a high school with black, with white, with Asian, with different, um, different types of people. But again, either I was blind to it or didn't recognize it, or it didn't happen, and it's just something I've not experienced. But how do I guess at the end of the day, the overall goal is to have you and I treated exactly the same regardless, anybody treated exactly the same regardless of where we're from, how we look, what we do, etc. um, I guess then I had a quote from John Millerese the other day when I interviewed him, and he was talking about how college athletes can prepare themselves for the pros um, well before they get to the pro level, and it was all about our actions aligning with our goals. So I guess is that the key then, to just to be the change that we want to see every day, to act the way that we should to get to the end goal of ultimately stamping out all of this inequality and injustice that's going on?
It has, excuse me, it has to be, but it has to be with the mindset of, yes, there are several things, multiple things that are going on in this world. But here we're talking about racism that's been part of this country since, 400 years or so. So if we're going to be pros at the college level with that kind of mindset going into the next level, all right, then it has to be a collective unit from leadership positions, because they hold the power to change, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if leadership positions aren't willing to change, then how can that growth have a waterfall effect to those that they are leading?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we continue to have the blinders on, we're only going to see what we can see. But if we could just peel away one set, another blinders, and open discussion with those that don't look like ourselves, okay, if we're able to do that, then we can implement little changes. Maybe not right away, maybe not right away, but these are it goes back to those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have leaders that are willing to feel awkward and willing to be like, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there to see what I've been missing. Maybe have not been missing. Maybe, maybe there are some items that need to be addressed. But it's kind of one of those things where if we don't ask those questions, if everyone looks just like how you look and they're in charge of making decisions, how can change happen?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's not a possible or impossible situation, but if we don't have a panel that looks like me, yourself, and others, how can we generate different ideas in order for the team or the organization to be different? That's all I'm saying. Those are the voices that needs to happen. Those are the things that, when we're able to, and like I said, it goes both ways. If I can't express what I have been through or what I go through, daily, in regards of I coach soccer, I just did my dissertation where at the time, out of 200 something schools, there were only 7 coaches of color, and I was one of the 7. And I was like, wow, and this was, I believe, at the Division II level. So I'm not gonna say, the hypocrisy is the NCAA believes in diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that they really want to promote. But then there's like a hurdle in the way, because even though the NCAA wants that, what are the schools that are involved with the NCAA doing to help promote that at a genuine level? Because they're the ones that hold the powers to hire, obviously there has to be a quantity of coaches that are able to coach at that level and everything like that. I get that, but if we look at our dynamic in Division II with the different amount of student athletes that are playing from all over the world, we see it all the time that there are a plethora of players such as yourself or myself that came from the college ranks that decide to go to the next level in their career as college coaches or even pro coaches, and those are the things that if the people that don't look like me don't have the time or the willingness just to meet and sit down, like how can we continue to build up people of color and to put them in these positions? But I also get it because there are other people that don't look like me trying to go for these positions, and those are fine. I will tell you this, I don't share this with most people. I've probably shared it with maybe 5 people, maybe 6. But when I was on my interview at University of North Georgia, my gut towards the end of the interview, and I was with a member of the search committee, I said, hey, I know this may sound weird, but I said, please make sure to hire the right person for the job. Please don't hire me due to my color. And I felt really weird saying that. That's probably the first time I've ever said something like that in my life. But I said that. One, it was a unique experience coming to to Dahlonega, where it's not very diverse. We all know that. But I also want to be in consideration due to my ability to lead and to coach at that time. And I wanted that out there for peace of mind, for self, and also to let them know what my character was in regards of going for the job, you know. And even though that was a tough thing for me to say, I felt like it was needed to say, because I'm a man of faith. I was listening to my inner spirit. And, you know, I'm here, you know. That's one of my personal stories that I experienced, you know.
Yeah, that's again just something that I don't know. I take for granted. I mean, I recruit in the same way, in that I don't, you know, we're heavily international, and you know, we have a diverse group and a diverse culture and different guys, and I don't recruit on skin color or on wealth or on anything. I recruit I try and get the highest character people, who are the best players that I can find. And if that's you know, if my starting 11 is 11 guys from Greenwood, South Carolina, or 11 internationals from England, or 11 black people from all over the world, as long as they're high character, they you know, will buy into everything that we're trying to put forward, and work hard, and be respectful, and all the different intangibles, then that's all that matters to me. What I guess on more of a local level to you, has there been any message or direction from your department, your school? Are there any initiatives that you guys are looking to do that, you know, coming down the pipeline here in the next weeks and months?
So a message was sent out, I believe, on Tuesday from University of North Georgia, and I was very happy to see that. You know, I was happy to see a military institution of higher learning dig deep and find it within their DNA to stand up in regards of that does not fit our mission statement, and we don't tolerate injustices. So that was great, especially being a member of University of North Georgia and a coach of color, because to me, I feel like it was a no-brainer in regards of, if we're going to hold our student athletes accountable in regards of, you know, breaking curfew, or you know, illegal drinking or drug use or whatever it is, or bullying or hazing. These are the things that, you know, at a drop of a pin, we're able to execute as coaches or whatever it is, but like, you can't do this. And this was, you know, we talk about coaching points when we go to different coaching educations. And, you know, we're taught we cannot, you know, these coaching points, you have to get them at the right time. And this was definitely a coaching point that, you know, we can't tolerate. So when you ask me if there are any platforms or forums that we're trying to lead, I'm not privy to what is happening above my pay grade with University of North Georgia. I can tell you that within our athletic department, that when well, let me go back some. Kaylee Ralton, the women's assistant, she's on this diverse and inclusion committee that I'm a part of with other coaches as well. And she was calling in just like how you did to check in on me. And she was thinking, hey, why don't we have one of our meetings? We haven't had one in a long time because of COVID-19. And I said, yeah, fair enough. That sounds great. Then I get on another phone call. I was checking in with our graduate assistant basketball coach, and we were talking, and I found that we were having the same, me talking to him, he was allowed to kind of vent and feel a little bit better after the conversation, to know that he wasn't alone, and he was asking all these different questions like, why didn't we do this? Why didn't the school do this? And all these different things. And the one thing that I learned in my silence over the weekend was, I started to think, you know, obviously I was hurt by the whole situation because it's reoccurring And the silence, as I told this young man, I said, doesn't necessarily mean that silence is bad for what we were in. Maybe that's the time of people asking themselves, what can they do, or not understanding the situation. Mm. So we fast forward that conversation, which allowed our conversation to give me the idea of opening up that diversity and inclusion meeting to all members of our athletic department, so that we can talk about the elephant in the room, elephant that's been in the room for like 400 years, to just dig deep in regards of, this is how the whole situation made me feel. And the analogy that I gave to Lee Glenn, he's the person that I called on that Saturday after I was cutting the yard. Once again, I'm a man of faith, so he was on my inner spirit, and I called him. He was on his way to Florida with his family, and I broke down. And, you could tell he's trying to pump me up in regards of, listen, we got to take this head on. I will touch base with you when we get to Florida. 10 minutes later, he pulls over, he sends me a text of more encouraging words and everything like that. Then he sends me a text, I think on Monday or Tuesday. And I broke it down this way to him. I said to him, in my heart, I know the people that I work with love me to death, and other coaches of color, everyone, they, you know what I'm saying? But this is how it felt. It felt that if I was on the same team, but I couldn't eat in the same restaurant, I couldn't travel in the same bus, everyone goes to the front door, but I gotta go through the back door. That's what it felt when the statement didn't come out, where I felt early enough to be like, this is wrong, let's stand up for it. Mm. In my heart, I understood that there's a possibility that the people that I love dearly just don't understand, or don't want to understand, or don't have the courage to ask what is happening, because throughout their lives, they've been like this. The privilege, in regards of the privilege of being not in those areas of growing up in poverty, or going to a good school system, or may not have colleagues or friends of color that they just don't know. So without having those types of conversations to enlighten others, then there is a push to try to make change. And that's where I was proud of University of North Georgia in regards of making those changes. Because when I shared that with Lee Glenn, he texted me back hours later, and he's like, these conversations have allowed himself to have self-reflection, for him to call, his former basketball players of color, to check in, to have a pulse on, wow, I'm woke now, as that's the expression. Like, maybe they didn't want to see it, maybe they just did, meaningful did not want to see it, but it's there and it keeps coming up. So I think what we're seeing now is hopefully a change, that this cannot be a fad, where everyone is talking about it. This has to be, a continuous effort to understand that racism is not going to be conquered over tweets or social posts or statements. It has to happen from women and gentlemen such as ourselves that hold positions of power to make the subtle changes that is necessary for one's organization. For me, I brought up the fact, I'll give you an example, that a couple of years ago, we had some players that went to go get a haircut. They had to go to a place that was about 30 or 45 minutes away, because locally there are no barbershops that can cut their hair. So they come to practice late. They left plenty of time to get there and back. The one thing that people that don't look like me don't know, it was like a Tuesday, and there's only one barber there. And there's like 5 players trying to get a haircut, plus the regular, people that normally go. So to get there, and this young man is like, "Coach, you gonna run them? These guys can't be late to practice." And self-reflection, I asked him these questions. I said, "Hey, where do you go for your haircut?" "I go to this place right here. It's 2 minutes down the street." So these guys have to go pretty much 45 minutes, 30 minutes to 45 minutes away to this place to go get a haircut. You know what time they left? He was like, no. They left like at 11 a.m., practice not until like 3 at the time.
Hmm.
He was like, oh. And so we had conversation. And I said, do you still think it's fair for me to run them? Because the closest barbershop is, 30 to 45 minutes away. So those types of conversations, he did the same thing what you did. Huh. No, that makes sense, coach. But he didn't know.
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't want to know. He just assumed that what is good for him is good for the person that doesn't look like him,
yeah,
and have the same accessibility. Those are the things that we have to talk about to try to change.
Yeah, I know. I think he said somewhere in there about silence not necessarily being a bad thing, because it allows for self-reflection. And it's such a powerful issue. It's such a big issue, and sometimes that silence and that self-reflection, people process things at a different rate. I would like to think if I was a little maybe slow on the uptake, or didn't come out straight away and do something or say something, that it was because I was trying to educate myself more and more to know how to fully respond in the best way that can have the biggest impact. So I guess the silence becomes a problem if somebody doesn't act or think about it, or reflect. So I guess that's an internal process we all have to go through in trying to be better equipped to tackle these things head on. So you spoke about your athletic department in the school there. On an even more micro level, what it's obviously more difficult because we don't have access to our team right now, but what communication, what message, if any, have you had with your team and your players within it so far?
Yeah, I after I was ever able to get my bearings again, it was kind of one of those things, the reflection of, okay, I happen to be, one of the leaders for our program, and it was one of those things where subtle, short, sweet, not in depth because everyone is away, and we had um, messages sent out in regards of basic things of we must continue to lead. We must lead by example so that we can have an impact within our communities and our society. Keep strong, keep showing your voice. But at this point in time, we must continue to stick together. And this is why we always focus on setting the example of what we want life after football.
Sure. So just that reinforcement of your values and the things that you things that you promote within your program. And we did a similar thing the other day. We have about small handful of guys still here in town, but obviously for the majority of us, we're overseas in different time zones and different parts of the US, and just a simple communication from our coaching staff to our players was that we'll continue to stick together. As you said, we'll stick together, we'll work through it, we'll continue to be strong. So yeah, you've congratulations on just receiving your doctorate in leadership. It's going to be a strange transition calling you doctor from now on, but I'll give it a go. How was that whole experience? What drove you to do it initially, and then sort of what were your biggest takeaways from it?
So I had a mentor at Georgia Southern, Dr. Steve Elliott. He's from Portsmouth, played at UNC Wilmington. After he got his doctorate, he ended up at Georgia Southern and was in a volunteer role. That's what he wanted because he had a family and didn't want to be position himself where he's always gone from his family. But we've had several conversations, and it was one of those things where he had mentioned, this is a gentleman from Portsmouth, English, just funny guy, great soccer player. And he would say, he would be like, Pat, you'd be great within higher education. And I kid you not, he's like, you're good looking, you're black, blah, 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 and you can help with change. And, he would always say these things in regards of trying to inspire me to be or get out of my comfort zone. Because when I was at Georgia Southern, I was in my comfort zone. thinking that I'd be there forever. So when the opportunity came to leave Georgia Southern, in my heart, I wanted to continue my education, and I thought that was going to lead within sport management, something I did in undergrad and my master's. But I couldn't really find a location where it was offered at the time.
Mm.
And then I had two colleagues that I worked with, now Dr. Potson and Brandy Jones, that got into Valdosta State, and their emphasis was in higher ed leadership. And those two were like, hey, you should consider this. And I was like, man, at this point in time, it's been about 8 years or so of being at North Georgia. At this time, family, doing youth stuff. And I was like, I'm coming up with these excuses. So even as a leader, I'm coming up with these excuses like, I don't have the time. There's no way. I'm asking these questions. Like, you got to go down to Macon, to meet with your cohort, 4 times during the semester. I'm thinking all the negatives. How's that going to work with the season? All these what ifs. So eventually I decided I noticed I was coming up with these natural excuses to say, I can't do this now because I'm married, because I have a child, because I have a team, because I coach youth, because of my responsibilities. And I went out on a limb, I applied, I got in, and so the adventure started. So I remember sitting in the auditorium, all these profound professors, and it felt like preseason, except we weren't going to go out to the field. They were saying, some of you aren't going to make it. Some of you are going to come up with excuses and all these different things. And you feel a certain type of way, and then you remember, cannot be worse than anything that I've experienced physically on the field. So at that point in time, I was in tune. It was a challenge. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm not going to say, I will say it was hard at times. And I will say that sometimes it wasn't convenient, but it was, a synopsis of life. We lose people. We gain people. You go through life and you keep going. And there was times, Lee, where the whole process of driving on a Saturday morning to Macon, you finally have a day off and you want to be with family and you can't be with family because you're doing this. Or there's times where, I would have a game and I would miss that cohort, and the professor would say, you're going to drop a letter grade, and you and I both know you can't drop letter grades to a certain level or else you get kicked out. The only way to make it up would be go to Valdosta State to make up that class on a different date if it works with your schedule. So I would have to do that. I would leave like 4 o'clock in the morning, get to class at 8 a.m., be there till 5, get back at 9, have a youth game on Sunday, and then back at it with North Georgia on that Monday. Yeah. So I look back, I started off with 1 child, have 3 now. So that was definitely, looking back, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. The time, whether I'm on the bus, whether if I was in the truck going to an event to go recruit, trying to do something to send off on that day, just find little pockets of space where you can continue to stay on top of your game with the academics and everything like that. Being within that culture allowed me to think a little bit differently, especially with what resonated with me, because there's different types of leaderships. I think when I first started, it was more of a do as I say. And now that has switched, and that probably switched back in 2015. If you recall, after 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, abysmal years for North Georgia, just bad. Culture was bad. And I put that all on me in regards of I'm the ones that recruit those players and everything like that. But I didn't necessarily see the light until 2015 and so on. Until then, because my mindset was I can help change individuals for the better. What I failed to realize was that change could only happen if someone is open to change. Mm-hmm. And that was the ding, 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 ding. So at that point, you would think that 2016 would follow the cycle. We graduated some players. I released some players, and that 2016 was a fresh start. And I remember playing Young Harris in the spring game up there. And I remember Markey and Dean, they looked at us, we looked at them, and they were like, huh, this is going to be interesting. You know, and you know, we have great relationships with those guys. So already, we're not even talking about tactics. We're just talking about the mindset of, I had to look in the mirror and identify what my problem was in regards of the players that we were getting, because we have to stretch those dollars, right? In regards of getting the right kind of mindset to come into our camp. So within that structure of leadership, I became more of a servant leadership. And the only role model that I can tell you, Jesus and Martin Luther King Jr., and there's others out there, but I had to flip the script in regards of my communication on certain items, because they're all going to be different, right? Student athletes all have these different issues that are going on with their lives that I have to be able to adapt and culturate their needs, or what we're looking for from player A to coach B, or whatever it is. So that allowed me to think a little bit more deeper. And there's if you have a chance, I know it's hard, John Maxwell, The Leadership Challenge. That book resonated with me. And that is something that I continue to review before each preseason to get me ready in regards of the challenges of trying to have the melting pot of players coming in, the different dynamics of attitudes and different talents coming in underneath one umbrella. I haven't mastered anything, but those are the things I'm more conscious of in regards of having that type of mentality as a servant, so that entail, it may not happen, because you and I both know when you're 18, you've really developed a lot of habits, good or bad, coming into camp. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a lot of time to help change those habits, but if we put them in that environment where they're allowed to think about those changes, over time, we get a better student athlete that is willing to play under one's philosophy. So I had to do a lot of self-reflection. It was not easy. I think I still have Stockholm syndrome because I feel like I should be writing. But I'm officially done. My dissertation was exploring the lives of Black male soccer coaches at the post-secondary level. My original plan was to do coaches of color, because obviously I am a coach of color and soccer is my love. So I wanted to write something that I was passionate about. My committee, my chair had asked me to get that down to the smallest level, which the smallest level was with Black male coaches, a common theme in regards to different sports. And, you know, it's a wonderful task. I think I wrote close to 170 pages. It was very tedious. If anyone is going to do this process, I would advise them to get a chair that is going to be their cheerleader, their motivator, to help you through the different processes, so you're not stuck out in limbo in regards of getting the work done. But it was awesome. Dr. Workman, I love her to death. And my search committee, if it wasn't for them, I'd still be somewhat in limbo, not knowing how to finish. But wonderful experience. If you have the opportunity, or any other coaches that are listening to this, I challenge myself to get out of my comfort zone, because sometimes when I say we as coaches or leaders, sometimes we feel like we've reached the pinnacle. You know, we don't go into it thinking that, okay, I got here, now I'm gonna stop. We don't go into that, just life happens. And sometimes we forget that we as coaches must continue to challenge ourselves to get better, or teachers or ADs or presidents, whatever it is, we must continue to not falter to complacency ourselves. And I think for me, I fell into some sort of complacency, because I felt like I knew what I was doing. We had some good seasons, and then the reality came back where boom, 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 losing seasons. bad culture, something had to change.
Mhm.
And it was me.
Well, I guess, throughout that, you and if you have a staff for long enough, you're the one constant through that. Your players with us, it's a revolving door of players. People graduate, new people come in, and if there is one constant throughout it all, it's the head coach. It's us, for as long as we're here. I can definitely relate, not on a doctorate level, but personally, I put myself through a master's degree online in sports administration from Arkansas State, and I've never even been to Arkansas. So, but I went through the same process. I was gonna start it one summer, and I thought, nah, I'll do it next year. The next year, found out my wife was pregnant. Oh, I'm going to support her through this. I'll do it next year. Well, fast forward to next summer, my daughter was then a couple of months old. Oh, I'll do it next year. And then eventually I'm going to have to do it regardless, because
Right.
it's something I'd always set out to do. The initial plan was to go and try and be a GA somewhere. And I think you and I even spoke about coming and doing it at North Georgia. And that's 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
But I sort of skipped a couple of steps. I went back to, Leeds McRae, and, I always wanted to get my master's degree, further my education. It's great to see that you're doing the same thing. I was going to ask you about your leadership style. I know you mentioned there about servant leadership. How has it evolved? How has it continued to evolve? Um, what are the different aspects of your leadership style? You've had almost 15 years of head coaching experience. So,
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I feel the old school players are the ones that are like, why couldn't we have this Coach Pat back when we were playing? Like these guys don't do this anymore. They don't do that anymore. So I think it's maybe it's wisdom, maybe it's age, maybe it's experience, maybe it's a combination of all those facets or factors that allow me to be more I want to use the word empathetic, but maybe more sensitive to the needs of it's okay to change. Like I knew coming to camp, there's things I experienced at Georgia Southern, I felt that weren't going to be good for the overall athlete of 3 days. Like it didn't make any sense, but that's what a lot of coaches like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do that. So changing those dynamics in regards for the student athlete to be a little bit more successful through a very compact season and still make it healthy. The mental side of it allowed me to think more about the healthcare. The physical part I think is easy. The mental part is having the ability to understand that these guys are not me. They have not had my experiences where, obviously I expect them to be tough mentally, but we must teach them. It's a different generation of kids, so those are the things that I from the top share with my staff, trickle down to the players in regards of, how much can we push them? Because obviously we want to push them and continue to push them. But what are the levels or what are the steps that we continue to get where we want to get here? But we must climb the ladder in order to get to where we are right here. And those are the things that I identified where before it was just like, you're going to do it this way and that's it.
Yeah.
No room, no excuses, nothing. And we still have that, but still be able to do it in a different way of the servant style in order to get that, because now it's coming from them.
Yeah, you're looking at, I'm sure just like we do, you have your certain non-negotiables, that you demand from your players, and that's the standards of excellence. But then with a lot of things, you put in, almost modern methods, to old school traits, and trying to do it in a different way, because in reality, if we don't adapt, we're always, as long as we're in this, collegiate coaching role, we're always going to be dealing with the same age player each time. It's 18 to 22-year-olds, but you and I are getting a year older and further away from being 18 to 22. So, you know, if we don't evolve, if we don't adapt, you know, what we were doing 5 years ago doesn't necessarily work today. There is brilliant. It's certainly, it's never an easy game. You know, I always, in preparing to face your teams, we know majority of the time it's going to be a goal either way. If you keep a clean sheet, you only need one, obviously, and that's always a message. Just try and keep a clean sheet, because you guys come all guns blazing, and you know it's never it's fun afterwards if you win. It's never fun during. So no, I love that. I love that competitive aspect. I love, you know, I think for us it's such a small conference, but so competitive that it allows us to get closer to each other as coaches. You know, we may see each other 2 and sometimes 3 times a year, which sometimes is too much, but is great. And I love competing against you and your program and your teams, and you know, and some of the earlier stuff that we spoke about. I hear you. I'm with you. I respect the heck out of you, and you know, I hope that this resonates with people, and that we can have our actions align with our overall goals across society. Congratulations on becoming a doctor. I think that's unbelievable that you continue to evolve and elevate yourself into leadership positions, and have that impact on your players and your family and those around you. And you know, I can definitely respect that. I can learn a lot from you, and look forward to continuing to do that moving forward. So thanks for your time. You've been very generous for it. Thanks for your willingness to share, and look forward to seeing you back out there. I think you come to us this year, so we'll be preparing the fans to be throwing things at your bus on your way in. Yeah,
No,
thanks very much for your time.
no, I appreciate you. You know, you've been doing this for a while, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share. You know, and once again, that's forward thinking on your part, and sensitive to what's happening in recent news. So I appreciate the opportunity. It goes both ways. I've respected you when you were a player. I respect you now as a coach. And I told you before that, you know, the future is bright for you. It really is. And I too am looking forward to the remix edition of the season coming up. But thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. Obviously, it's not everything, but it starts with platforms like this that allows us to spark the idea from different coaches or players or administrators to make the change. So thank you, Lee. I appreciate you. I love you, man. Respect you as well. And I'll see you soon, buddy.
See you soon, Pat.